consuming this broadcast, welcome to BasTalk, a podcast about every day at work. It's been a while that I have recorded an episode, so thank you for being patient. Thank you for sticking around. Thank you for your notes and thank you for your messages. I know some people really missed having the BasTalk episode, so it fills me with joy that people, the quiet ones, finally spoke up. Maybe I should do this a little more often. A lot of you sent notes saying, "What happened? Did you shut shop? And have you given up on your passion?" And I said, "No, that's not it. Life is such that powering through passion and earning your daily wage, as it were, is sometimes very challenging. But it's the passion that keeps going and brings you back no matter what." So, long story short, I was traveling. It was a whole bunch of things that were happening at work, and a whole lot of things. And they're still on. So there'll be a little bit of intermittent posting for the time being, not for long. And then it will be business as usual. For those tuning in for the first time, thank you for being on BasTalk. It's a weekly podcast, usually. The format is simple, straightforward, often spontaneous. Pick a topic from every day at work and go deep dive into it without the mumbo jumbo, without the fluff stuff, without being cosmetic about it, being as simple and as direct as possible. For those who haven't heard the disclaimer episode earlier, I will repeat it for your benefit, advantage, and clarity of thought. All the content that you hear on BasTalk is personal. It's my own original thoughts. None of my past, present, or future employers either endorse or subscribe to any of these. This is purely a personal podcast and content curated not just from my experiences over the corporate landscape globally, but also learning, interacting, mixing with so many global leaders, not just leaders, individual contributors, people across the length and breadth of the society in the world. And so what it does is it gives me a ton of content, but I try to simplify it, break it down. And since it's largely focused on the India listener base, if you will, not that folks from US or UK, and we have had listeners from all over the world actually. Some of the core concepts remain the same. So you will have topics around people management, conflict resolution, organizational behavior, culture, office culture, those kind of things, right? So these kind of transcend boundaries, transcend even functions. Like I come from a sales and business development background, but that doesn't mean folks from finance or technology or pre-sales or any of those functions won't find the content relevant, because we're talking about people at the end of the day. And so how we react, respond in situations is what BasTalk is all about. And as you would have noticed, that this is not REM, like rapid quick notes and get rich quick. Here are the 3 tips and your life will change kind of a podcast. That's what it does not do. Each episode will leave you with more questions. It will leave you with more things to think about. And it's a slow burn, solo. Rarely or never do I get guests on the podcast. Sometimes I do. If you scroll back a few seasons, we'll have some leadership studio. And I intend to do that. It's not that I've abandoned the idea. It's just that the logistics, the coordination, the whole bunch of things, very difficult. Time consuming, not difficult, time consuming. And so, but yeah, that's on the bucket list. The other thing is, of course, about going on YouTube. I have a couple of episodes uploaded on YouTube. You will find it under Ionisms, AAYANISMS. You can check that out, and that's almost about everything: pets, politics, movies, geopolitics, sports, cricket, and whatever. And there are a few episodes of BasTalk as well. So like I said, it's not that I do not want to or intend to. It's just that doing the audio thing is faster, quicker, easier in my available time. And that's why I do what I do. Well, what with all those long disclaimers, reference to context, it's almost like beginning afresh, right? And a lot of you often join in middle of the conversation and realize what is the whole point of having bus talk. Bus talk stems largely from the fact that in the work sphere, folks between 5 to 15 years or 18 years of work ex, the content is largely directed towards them and the people surrounding, managing, leading, supporting them. Right? So why this 5 to 15 years is because there is a ton of content for leaders or leadership, and there is a lot of content for people just graduated or just starting on the first year campus hires and so on and so forth. Very limited content for the middle managers. That seems to be the flavor of the season now, but BasTalk has been at it for a while. And so that's where the whole context of BasTalk is all about. As always, each week I come up with some curated topics that have been floating in the corporate circle and try and slice and dice it, simplify it, and see if it makes sense to you. And like I said, leave you with some things to think about and see if you could do something about it. There'll be no prescriptions, but somewhere give you a framework to think about. And as always, if you've sorted yourself out, you know your shit, then God bless you. Like so be it. With that, let's jump right in to this episode, and I wanted to start off with a hot topic, and that's been the rise of the individual contributor. You heard that right. We've often heard the path to career progress is becoming a people manager. That was the powerful thing to aspire for, to be for, probably got more money. It's not that ICs or individual contributors did not succeed well earlier, but it seems to me with all the recent articles from various big tech leaders, flatten organizations, flatten hierarchical structures, reduce middle managers, remove managers, increase the number of individual contributors, and so on and so forth, right? So I'm going to do a deep dive, give you a pros and cons of it, whether it makes sense, what are the outcomes of such an action, do these messages apply to everybody or all strata of society, all corporates, or is it just probably works for a few organizations, and so on and so forth. So stay tuned, watch where you're walking if you're on your morning walk. If you're stuck in traffic, this is going to be your companion for the next 45 odd minutes. So sit back, relax, switch on your headphones, close your eyes, and let's dive into this episode of Bus Talk. Many moons ago, the uber goal for any individual contributor was to become a manager, like a team leader. I was no different. I was surrounded, geared to become a people manager, and I defined success as becoming a people manager over and above being an individual contributor. So, lo and behold, as time, as I progressed in my career, I got a chance to leapfrog ahead of some of my peers and become an individual, become a people manager, and as early as 2003. Clearly, a few months into the role, I realized, wow, that is not what I thought. And typically, when you are an individual contributor, you see some of your managers and you think, gosh, if I could become the manager, then my life would be so much more easier. I mean, in fact, we had some of these managers who, with their hands behind their back, would stroll leisurely across the corridor while we were fretting frantically about the numbers, the quarters, and everything. And we thought, man, we're doing all the heavy lifting and these guys are just sending out some reports. And I wish my life was like that. And so that was the general sentiment across the floor. And so the aspirational place to be, the appraisal conversation was always, when do I become a manager? When do I become a team leader? It didn't just end at the workplace. When you went back home, folks who didn't understand the corporate culture back then, I'm talking well 20, 25 years earlier, they had limited understanding, or they had the understanding of how Indian corporate culture worked. Indian corporate culture at the time was largely, yeah, I'm talking about 90s and folks who grew up in the 80s and the 90s. And that kind of corporate culture was you get in as an apprentice and retire as a general manager or something. Like, so you dedicate 25 years, 30 years of your career to one organization. You're not hustling for promotions. You kind of are grateful that you have a job, and you find yourself that small little cubicle, eventually graduating into that corner office, or if you're so lucky, uh, before passing through many cabins, wooden cabins, um, and people often being around to serve you tea, coffee, and of course the proverbial, if you've heard BasTalk before, the printers. You had access to your own printer in your own cabin. How cool is that? Now, fast forward to 2025. Clearly, a lot has changed. But back then, being a manager was the in thing. Like, if you went home and said you're an individual contributor in a very large big tech company, the prompt response would be, well, the neighbor's daughter is a director or a vice president, or AVP was the title, if I remember correctly. AVP in a bank. Why are you not an AVP? And I said, I just have 4 years of work X. How can I become an AVP? No, but they have become AVP already, and you're still a whatever executive. And I was like, that's a bank. It's a discretionary job title. There could be 350 AVPs for all you care, but there are only 20 of us as senior executives or business development executives. But difficult to explain, right? And so I left the argument there and said, okay, someday I will become a manager. And so I did. And when I did become a manager, and I realized all those illusions, assumptions that I had of being a manager and strolling leisurely across the aisle were just that, assumptions. And you and I both know what assumptions make us believe. It makes us believe what isn't there. And so it was a awakening, if I might put it mildly. It was a wake-up call. Like, oh my God, my task list just went from 30 to 300, and I found some newer directions, primarily because nobody really teaches you how to become a manager. Like, there is no, here is your manager coaching guide or enablement session, right? At least it wasn't there at the time. I'm sure some organizations do have it now. At the time, there was no graduating program for individual contributors to become people managers. And so it was always going to be a learn on the job experience, but it's a hard learn. It's not a swift glide, easy learn, because you've been a great individual contributor. And so the expectation is that you will at least ensure that the individual contribution of the team part of it in your job description is taken care of. So if you're a people manager, if you're of a team leader of a sales organization, then you can teach, because you've been a top performer, you can teach other executives how to be a replicate your work, or replicate your style, or your tips and tricks and techniques, and how you became successful. But as you realize that that is just one part of the job, and that's no more than 25 to 30%. The balance, 70%, is where all the workload is. You're talking about analytics, you're talking about predictions, you're talking about time management, you're talking about perception management, you're talking about conflict resolution, you're talking about career development, growth, and crisis management, and so many other issues that crop up. Nobody really teaches you how to handle these nuances or situations. Of course, there are some programs here and there, but there isn't a comprehensive course. And that's if some of the B School folks are listening to this, reach out to me and I'd love to collaborate and develop a program for this particular transition, how to become a manager, a people manager from an individual contributor. But important to remember that it was at a time when becoming a people manager was a preferred chosen career path. And that kind of gives me the perfect segue into today's content or today's episode. Is it the right time to be a people manager? Or is it the age of the individual contributor, the IC guy? Now, back in the day, most organizations would represent the career levels of a people manager as M1, M2, or something like that, right? And some had L, some had bands, and so on and so forth, right? But in general, just to simplify, first level manager M1, and say the highest level manager M10. And so the IC, or the individual contributor, was IC 0, start campus hire or whatever, IC 1 or 2 years of experience, and goes on to, I think, IC 6 or 7. I think that's where probably, I'm not so sure if there was a M10 equivalent of an IC, individual contributor. Could have been. I mean, I'm not so sure. But it wasn't a preferred choice. And usually what we found was those people who were the more extroverted, more reach out, hang out, usually weird and geared. And this is just, there's no scientific evidence for this. I'm just leaning in on some of the stuff that I've seen in a very small sample data set across a few geographies. So that was the trend. The people would hang around a bunch of people, the high fives. It's like a soccer team or a cricket team, stuff like that. So it was a team thing, and that was one. And so the people managers role journey seemed to be that much more attractive, that much more fascinating, while the quieter ones, the people like me, stand in the back and let other people do the talking kind of people, usually took the IC path, individual contributors, or pre-sales folks, or subject matter expert folks, or whatever, guys would like to be left alone, and they did their bit, some out of choice and most by, well, there's no other choice but to do this. And so that kind of changed me. I'm not saying I changed that. What I'm trying to say is I realized that if I had to, while being an introvert slash ambivert, if you will, I wasn't an ambivert at that time, probably am now. But at the time I was more leaning towards the introvert side. I realized that I had to be out there rather than fight my own battles internally. That was one of my passion projects to express myself a little better. It was an internal battle. But the thing that championed the transition was the fact that I was passionate about solving problems for people. And it went back in school days, it went back to college days, it went back to many other situations where there would be fight between two friends, and I would be the peacemaker and solve a problem between them. And so it kind of it was a character trait or a leadership trait or a feature of my personality where I felt that I could be a good people manager. And so combined with these two things, like the ability to tackle people, situations, or issues, and this internal battle of not being left behind, and at the time being quiet always meant that largely meant that you don't have enough stuff to say or share, and whoever raised their hands first clearly were the smarter ones and stuff like that. And so it was the sign of times, if you will. Lot much more awareness has uh, crept in now, and people are more aware of who's an introvert, who's an ambivert, and who's an extrovert, and the gap has also narrowed. The introverts are more vocal now, and the extroverts are more sensitive now, if you will, or it's not gone off the charts, in my view. It's like, it's not that the introverts have become a recluse completely and extroverts have become extremists, and I don't mean it in the bad way. So, and that's happened because of the sensitization of the workplace, and that's a good thing that has happened. For all the criticism about the woke workplace, I think some of these things were much needed, because there's a sizable chunk which was misunderstood for being, oh, he or she is the quiet one, so probably I don't think she will make for a, or he will make for a good people manager. And because the inference was, it needed superior communication skills, and only extroverts had great communication skills. Um, as it turns out, that wasn't always the case. Introverts also have good communication skills. It's They have a circumspect audience for to exhibit that skill. Let's just say so. They don't like short talks. They don't like meaningless, pointless conversations. So the set of introverts who led teams had a very different or distinct leadership style as compared to those who were extroverts. And many times, the if two managers were at the either end, one an extrovert, the other an introvert, there would always be a clash of approaches, and that would lead to difficult conversations and situations at work. It exists even today, to be fair. It exists even today, but in a slightly different form. I think from introvert and extrovert, it has now become the battle between the restless and the calm. Because of lowering attention spans, the stuff that is the most difficult is to make sense in a very short span of time. Like, this podcast is a slow burn, long. It's like counterintuitive. In the age of rapid communications, quick one, two, three things, here is a podcast that goes on for 45 minutes or 50 minutes, and there's no end to it. If there is more thing that come to me organically, I will do that. But that's the whole point. That's the way the clash is. Just because someone takes a little longer to speak does not mean they don't have enough content. They do. It's just that somebody's patience level has gone down so much that they are used to hearing bullet points, begin with the end in mind. Just tell me three things and I'll get done. Don't need to, give me a preamble to the story or reference to context, stuff like that. Well, some of it might be true, but it often throws a lot of the introverts out of gear. It's like, how do I speak? I need to have a calm environment to speak. And so the restless often masquerade as being efficient. There are lots of people who are super restless come across in the organization that, oh, look at this person. He or she or they are constantly on the move. The boss pings a message, and within 3.5 seconds, there is a counter message. Yes, I'm doing it, or on this, or stuff like that. It often masquerades as efficiency, but it's restlessness. Whereas the other person could be misunderstood as, oh, the person doesn't care. And if the boss or the super boss happens to be of the similar nature, that of being restless, then it compounds the problem that, oh my God, look, one person answered, the other person doesn't care. So maybe they're not interested. And so a perception develops and builds. Anywho, so we are digressing on how the role of the IC has changed over the years, but to bring it back to 2025. What has changed is, the with the post pandemic, I think, in corporate landscape, if you want to say the big milestone moments, I think the one big milestone moment was when internet or like let's say Hotmail happened to everybody. Like if you didn't have an Hotmail account, you were not really happening at that time. And I'm dating myself, but you're talking about 98, 99. Then fast forward, say 2010, 2011, you probably began speaking about cloud. If you didn't understand what a cloud services is or the subscription economy is, then you were kind of being left out. So seminal moment in the big tech landscape or evolution. And then the pandemic happened. So the collaboration came into big focus, that work could get done remotely. All the perceptions about, well, how will we monitor, how will we have discipline, and so on and so forth, work still got done. And so now, uh, post the pandemic, there is a situation of running a tight ship, given the fact that there are mass layoffs that are happening everywhere and lots of challenges happening where organizations are trying to run a very lean, mean, tight machine. What it the outcome of that is there is pressure on the individual contributor as much as there is on the manager. And then for the super manager or the senior supervisor, the pressure is how many direct reports do you have? Is that enough? Classically, the span of control was 1:6, 1:7. And it depends on the complexity of the business, your organization, the nature of work, and a whole bunch of other things. But a safe bet would be 5 to 6. Moment it goes beyond 6, physically, emotionally, mentally, it's a draining exercise. Now, here is a situation where people are saying, I have 40 direct reports. Somebody saying I should at least have 15 direct reports. I want to reduce bureaucracy, remove all the unnecessary tasks and centralized power and all that. It sounds okay, and it sounds good because there is red tapeism, there is bureaucracy, there is, it's a very individual manager dependent. I know that's an oxymoron there, but it's a manager to manager dependency. Some managers are hands off, like I trust my team and I treat them as adults and I will hold them accountable on the results, help them in the process, and wherever they need help, I will be their fallback option. Servant leadership kind of an approach. On the other hand, there are tons and tons of managers who are extreme micromanagers. They would have, oh, you need my approval. If you want to travel, you need my approval. If you need to go take a break, you need my approval. If you want to, have lunch, take my approval. Okay, I'm exaggerating, given. But some people feel the need to be in constant control and to know what the hell is going on. Not knowing is a fear factor for them. They fear that if tomorrow I am asked a question for a particular problem statement or a failure, and I have to say, let me get back to you, or I do not know, let me find out, then it might be construed or perceived badly on their ability to be in control of their business. There is an element of truth to that, but come on, if you have held your team accountable to deliver and the team is delivering, then I don't think anybody needs to interfere on how they go about the business, as long as all the indicators and markers are in place. Please understand, being hands off does not mean not concerned or being lackadaisical about it or being casual about it. That's the wrong interpretation. Hands off mean let people breathe, let people figure out their strengths. Oftentimes, a manager's support becomes their crutch. They are always saying, oh no, do it this way, do it this way. It's like the idea is not to build a clone army. Like, why do you want to make everyone just like how you would have functioned in a similar role? Idea is to encourage diversity. Richness of the team comes from the fact that 6 different people bring 6 different skill sets to the table, and you nurture, guide, shape them to a common goal, and make them successful. Right? Wow, no, that came out right, it did. And so, but I truly mean that. I truly mean that. But turns out more and more managers do not want to risk, rely this kind of an approach and say, no, no, I want to be in control. And so now suddenly what they could have done with three or four, they suddenly have to now deal with 10 or 15. It is an incredibly difficult task. And so for the individual contributor, and many of you are individual contributors listening to this, please think about this. You're in 2025, and it's the rise of the age of the individual contributor. The power has gone back to the employer. Earlier it was with the employee, now it's with the employer. Why? Because there are fewer jobs, and people will want you to, and people will remind you that jobs are hard to get by. And if you've crossed the highly employable zone, which is 0 to 10 years, you will find yourself finding jobs a little less easy, even though you're fully qualified, eligible, equipped. And if you've crossed the 20-year mark, that is slightly more difficult. Then you largely rely on the set of people you know. But then earlier, people could accommodate another manager or a leader. Now, the offer that you might get is that why don't you become a senior individual contributor? And so the shift in the corporate structures from hierarchical to flat organizations is here to stay now, at least for the foreseeable. I was about to use the word future. I want to say for the till, or let me simplify, till the next shit hits the fan. And it's always the case that there's a knee-jerk reaction. Right now, the knee-jerk reaction is, well, I have to show profitability, optimize cost, because revenue is not probably going double digits as it should. And so I will run a very lean organization. What it does is it stresses out the system. There is a stress factor, right? And people have to work more, longer, and that's why you keep hearing 70-hour work weeks, work on Sundays, and stuff like that. And many managers who are not equipped, able, capable, mature, sensitive, or whatever word that you want to use, will relay this information in very different ways. Right? Some who are very mature will absorb the pressure and say, hey, don't worry, I got you. I've got your back covered. You just make sure you do your bit, and we'll take care of this. Probably you need to do a little bit extra, but let me help you get there. But many of the other managers are going to come back and say, well, you do this or else I'm going to put you on a plan and take you out of the system. And so there is always this threat factor looming large over your shoulders that if you miss your deliverable quota, commit, whatever that might be, then you might just be led out of the system, and the person didn't perform, so I couldn't carry dead weight, and so I'm not going to wait for the end of the year to figure the shit out. I took a quick decision, and there will be a lot of people who will stand up and applaud for the sharpness of the thought process and think, while while this sounds good to some people, I'm sure, it has a business impact. Oftentimes, what people misread is the business continuity. What happens is when you leave a good performer because they had maybe a soft period, and then you let the person go, and then you get the new person on board, you're talking about a productivity gap of at least 5 to 7 months till such time the new person gets hired, onboarded, trained, matured, and hits the top optimal productivity that this existing person had until recently. So the gap between two peaks of performance is at least 7 months. Now multiply that by the number of people you let go. That's a lot of man hours lost. Who is going to be held accountable for that? So it's often, the system is so designed that it works out as a transformation agent agenda for the manager. Look, How I transformed the team? Well, they were poor performers, and I took a hard decision. And I'm running a tight machine, so I need another year. And a lot of leaders tend to buy time, playing God, playing the Messiah or the transformation agent, projecting themselves as, well, look, I saved this organization from further carrying dead weight and losing, right? But eventually the numbers still don't happen. So is it worth, and it's an argument out there, is it worth to invest in people, turn them around, and reduce the productivity gap and ensure business continuity versus take a quick fire decision, let people go and find new people as and when they come and hope they ramp up quickly? There are, I mean, I can share this as a neutral observation that there are success and failure examples on either of these cases where people have taken a very smart decision to let people go and not carry debt weight. That's really worked out well, and it has backfired big time in plenty of cases as well. Likewise, there have been instances where people have shown faith, retained these people despite they having a difficult period or a lean patch, and they have reaped rich dividends shortly after. And it has also been reported multiple times that yes, they did take a leap of faith and took a chance, took a brunt on their people's behalf, only to find that this person found a better offer at the end of the day and quit the job and went. So you end up looking like a jackass. That, hey, weren't you the guy you were backing this while we asked you to let them go? So these are the complexities of people managers. And so it brings me to the point that is there a case today that if you have an option between becoming a people manager versus remaining an individual contributor, would you rather choose being an individual contributor? I think that's the uber question. That's the answer you're probably looking for. And as always, right, I won't be prescriptive, or projections, as it were, but these are more of reflections. And the reason I gave you all the backdrop, reference to context, and examples up until this point is because if you decide to become a people manager, it has to be independent of the trend of the times. And the flip side is true as well, which means if you do intend to remain an individual contributor, it has to be independent of what's going on, because these things are temporary or cyclical in nature. Sometimes this will happen. Sometimes in 3 years' time, people will realize having 15 direct reports is not such a smart idea. And people will say, oh, I need to break down. It's a division of labor. It's a smarter productivity breakup where two people manage 15 people, and much more work gets done. And so the trend will change again. And so the points to think about, if I would just give you 2-3 things to think about in the case of an individual contributor, it's like you're preferring expertise over management. So if you think that you are a skilled developer and you have some core specialist skill set, remember that has a longer tenure, longer legs than the generalist profile. The generalist profile is harder. The specialist is a narrower scope, but probably has a longer scope. Like you are the only person in your organization who can now do data science or AI, advanced labeling, or what have you. Nobody else can do that, right? So you have a longevity as compared to, say, a people manager who probably has done people management experience, has led a team of developers before, which is okay. If that person doesn't do, somebody else will. I mean, there are lots of people managers who couldn't fill the shoes of that person. So that's a big decision you got to take. So expertise over management. Also, the next thing you got to think about is autonomy versus flexibility. Like once you become a manager, there are a whole bunch of restrictions that come your way. What you can do, what you can't do. There are restrictions as an individual contributor as well, but you're kind of you can switch off at 6 o'clock. You can't switch off at 6 o'clock if you're a people manager. Doesn't happen. Right? You did your bit. You met your KRAs and KPIs, and that's it, right? What else is there? There's no further expectations. Yes, there could be a fallout to that people you might not get paid as much. But like I said, if you're a specialist, then that argument also can be questioned. That I'm a specialist, so I should get equally, if not paid more, for the critical skill that I bring to the table. And last but not the least is specialization and innovation, right? ICs drive innovation with focused expertise. You can you can come up with newer ideas and ways and means to solve problems, whereas people managers largely will have to follow the guidelines of their senior management, and the senior management has to follow the guidelines of their senior management, right? It's a hierarchical thing. So that's from a IC standpoint. From a people manager standpoint, please realize, growing from 0 to 10 years is relatively easier. The slowdown, the squeeze happens in the middle management. The pressure comes from top, pressure comes from below, expectations are high, and your hands are tied. You can't just do, you want to do a whole bunch of things, but if your boss says no, you cannot, right? And you know you can do it, but you just can't. You have to follow instructions. You're more like an execution manager. You're almost like a right hand of your manager until you become that manager and realize you're the right hand of their manager. And so the hierarchical thing sometimes is very frustrating for people managers. Well, if you don't like hierarchy so much, then be an individual contributor. But like I said, if you've chosen the path of being a people manager, then hierarchy, squeeze, pressure, constraints are a part of life. Get used to it. It isn't going away even if you become a senior manager or a director or a VP or a senior VP. It keeps happening. So if I were to conclude and summarize that, what is the future? Can these hybrid models of ICs and people managers remain in the right balance? Will there be a tilt? My sense is that this will rebalance itself sooner than you can imagine, because in when you could manage 15 people per manager, say 20 years earlier or 30 years earlier, because the complexity, the quanta, the set of processes were fewer, lesser, the load was easier to manage and handle. So probably life was simpler back then, and so one could imagine, fathom running a 15-member team. 2025, the complexities of running a 15-member team are huge. It's massive. It's almost, I think it will burn down a lot of things. Emotional well-being, there'll be mental breakdowns, there will be emotional outbursts, there will be attrition, and if everybody becomes an individual contributor, will efficiency be there? With oversight gone, will it creep more errors? No matter how many systems you have, and you can say, I will replace those systems with more efficient AI, which will point out the errors. So will AI be your new manager? Is something to think about. But I do think that at least in the near term, and I say near term is less than equal to 2030, we are in 2025. So in 5 years, I do see a shift coming. And I might be wrong. For all you know, things often change and remain changed that way. The flavor of the season is, of course, the ICE being an individual contributor. But in the context of the complexity of the work and its outcomes, probably think it will have to rebalance itself to some mid path. So what do I mean by that? Like, it may not go back to its original, there were in the best of times there were 1:5, like a 15-member team had 3 managers. Now it might not revert to those levels, but probably it'll become, you will need two managers to run a 15-member team for sure. Very, very difficult practically to execute that. And so let's see. Let me know your thoughts. Are you an individual contributor? Are you a people manager? How many people do you manage? And if you're an individual contributor, what are your thoughts? How are you feeling today? Are you feeling less pressured, more empowered? Are you feeling, oh, this is just a momentary lapse of reasoning and things will return? So leave me a note. If you guys don't know where to, then there's a website called www.bastalk.in. That's bustalk.in. You can subscribe and leave a message there. I can always reach out to me on LinkedIn. That's Ironban, AAYNBAN. It's IN/Ironban. Or ionisms, hashtag ionisms on platform X. These are the fastest ways you can reach me. If you so care, leave a voice message. I'd love to hear your voice and see where this conversation takes you ahead or takes you forward. That's all the time I had for this episode of BasTalk, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as I did sharing it with you. As always, these are just thoughts. Give it, take it with a pinch of salt. And like I said, if you've sorted, let us know how you've sorted the conundrum between being a people manager and individual contributor. And I'm happy to give you a shout out in subsequent episodes. Till we meet the next time, stay well, stay safe, and keep listening to BasTalk. This is your host, Ian, and I wish you a great week ahead. Cheers.